everyone, and welcome to the SBL waiting room. Probably not the face you expected to see sitting here. That's because Aggro last year was the host and herald of the SBL waiting room. But it's me, GoreMiser, this year. Aggro taking a step back and letting me take the reins for the show. And as you can guess, we don't have that much longer. What, about 16 minutes left until we actually get to see this week of the SBL. So we're going to try to get everything that you need to know about this week and what happened last week all in this next short little, I guess, quarter of an hour for you to make sure it's nice and compact. The biggest thing is that last week was a very interesting one at that, right? We had a first week of the SBL where pretty much all expectations, except for what, maybe the Dragons, were really subverted. Like, I expected to see maybe some struggles from the Scarabs. We did technically get to see that, but they pulled out a win. But the Oni Warriors and the Titans were the teams that, at least in my eyes, took a lot away in the sense that they didn't get their win, right? A lot of surprises that came through. Plus, it was the first time we got to see this newest patch with Gilgamesh and all the new map changes, including those vine walls getting added in competitive play. It was interesting to watch. Of course, we get to see the culmination of that and what an extra week of work looks like for the Pro League players a little bit later today. I'm excited for that one. I'm sure you are too. But, you know, Aggro, when he handed me the show, he didn't want to hand me everything. He still wanted his opportunity to get a little bit of an opinion out there. So here we have opinions from Aggro.
Oh, hey, what's up? Aggro here. I'm going to be doing a new segment on Esports Weekly. I'm going to call it Aggro's Opinions. I know that's typically with an O, but not for this segment it isn't. It's with an A. I'm going to be coming in with my hot takes whenever I have them from time to time, but clearly this setting isn't going to work, so just give me a minute. I'll be down there in a second, and we'll get into giving you some hot takes. Much, much better. Look, here's the deal. Adapting the current greatest player of all time. His resume speaks for itself, but he's done at the SPL level. He's moving on to the SEC, and that means that players are going to have their opportunity to surpass him. And I think two players in particular are going to be vying for that title as soon as the end of this year. I'm talking about Polar Bear Mike from the Jade Dragons and Paul from the Tartarus Titans. And this rivalry, in a way, is so interesting to me because their careers have become intertwined. You look at what Mike has done over the last few years: Season 4, World Champion; Season 5, #1 seed all year; Season 6, #1 seed all year; Season 7, #1 seed all year. But here's the thing: eliminated Season 5 by Paul, eliminated Season 6 by Paul, eliminated Season 7 by Paul. 6 and 7, of course, in the finals of the World Championships. So does that mean that Paul just has the edge? I'm not sure that it does. I think you have to look at the regular season performance over that period of time if you want to be talking about the best all-around player in Smite's history. But I think it's a fair argument to say that Paul's dominance in the playoffs, especially over the last 2 years, and extra especially for the Season 8 World Finals, which was maybe the best individual performance of a player we've ever seen at the highest level, maybe Paul does have that edge. I think the key for me is what Paul is going to do this year on the Tartarus Titans. Everyone's expecting Mike and the Jade Dragons to be dominant, but what is Paul going to bring on a new team? Can he be better in the regular season this year? Can he eliminate Mike again and guarantee himself that greatest of all time status? Can't wait to find out. So there it is. That's my opinion. And if you want to tweet at me about it, don't, unless you're agreeing with me. I'll like every tweet that agrees with me, and I'll ignore everyone that doesn't. So just again, tweet at me that you agree, not that you disagree, because I'm not going to care if you disagree. It doesn't matter.
They're myths that to this day he's still in that room, still talking about whether or not you should be tweeting at him. We have no idea. I think he said technically he's moving to a new house, but come on, we all know he's just locked in there. Hey, you guys can probably see that's Finch and Dave sitting over there to my left that you can see. And this is going to be, I guess on the screen, it's the right side of the screen. Either way, you get where they are and you know what they're doing.
We're here.
You used to know last year that Finch and Dave did a lot of recap stuff, and admittedly, look, you can go to SMITEProLeague.com, see the scores from last week. You can get all of the numbers and things like that, right, thrown at you. But Finch and Dave have nice, unique perspectives to give us on what they were able to take away. So, Dave, why don't you go ahead and start us off? What stood out with you? How about that one in week #1?
Yeah, look, a lot of moving and shaking happened in week #1, team-wise. A lot of these teams came in. We expected struggles and growth for some of these teams that had bits and pieces all need to mesh together. And the Camelot Kings was the team that stood out to me because it was the opposite. I thought that this team made up of Variety, Twig, Big Man Tanks, Netrioid, and Genetics was going to need more time to look better. But it was kind of the exact opposite. You're going to see highlights here from a little bit of everyone. The final highlight in this play is how good this team is playing together as a unit already. Now you're saying, Dave, look, they decimated the Titans in a 2-0 win and then lost 0-2 to the Jade Dragons. Totally fair. They 2-0'd and then got 0-2'd. I would argue that only one of the games against the Jade Dragons, they actually looked bad. They looked very competitive in the second game of that set. Here's Variety soloing Sanford Soccer, by the way, if that shows you the confidence that this guy is playing with. Things to be worried about if you're playing against the Kings later on this year. But I already love seeing specifically Netrioid and Genetics, how well they're meshing with this squad as well. This play right here is a little bit of everything from everyone. That's Big Man Tings hitting the ability to the best of his abilities, all set up by Genetics on a good freeze, and then Captain Twig was right there playing as well. And how great is it to see Captain Twig playing back in the jungle near the top of his game. So my big takeaway from week 1, despite being 1-1, is that the Camelot Kings, they look good. They're going to be a dark horse front-runner team in all these playoff events, I think, as the year goes on. If this is the beginning stages of a team where 3-4 of these guys are all playing together for the first time, it's something to be worried about, I think, for the rest of this league. Twig looks great. Big Man Tings is playing the facilitator role. Variety's playing with confidence. And Netrioid and Genetics, a duo lane that is such an interesting pairing that I did not expect to see paired together, are flying on all cylinders. They have a matchup later this week against the Leviathans that I think is going to be a great one. So, honestly, Gore, I think my takeaway is, despite being 1-1, I was very surprised with how good, right off the bat, this Kings team looked. I mean, if your one loss is to the Jade Dragons, how good they look, you're certainly not feeling bad.
And I think that's kind of where all of us were, right? Now, I'll give a little spoiler. Our match of the week is actually that Kings game versus the Leviathans a little bit later on. But it is interesting. And, Finch, I'd say that Dave kind of stole the easy one. Like, the Kings looking good. That was, like, one of the bigger surprises that came out of week number 1. Finch, what stood out for you?
Yeah, I think Dave needs the crutch of the easier storyline to talk about, so I'm happy to give that one to him. Listen, for me, the standout from week 1 had to be the Leviathans. This team in Season 7, when they were Sanguine, came in and defied all expectations, and they did it again here in week 1, Season 8, with a new solo laner and a new ADC in Yarkor. And to me, it comes down to the front line. Wrong you was absolutely nuts in week 1. The Shards of Ice to avoid the pluck, the wall to block off the whole team was obviously impressive, what he was able to pull off there. And that wasn't the only impressive play that he made throughout that week. That front line, to me, has become, I mean Julio and Yarkor, Julio and Wrong You, one of the very best front lines that's out there, period, right now. I mean, I know everyone wants to think about Final Can PBM, but these guys might be the very next best. And then what do Julio and Wrong You do when they're making all these spectacular plays? When Julio is getting triple kills like you're seeing right now, and when Wrong You is providing all the space the backline need, they're setting up for Shinto and Yarkor, the new backline that they have, to basically just cast for free. And remember that they're giving Shinto all this far in the middle lane. He's going to be fed in all their games, and he's going to have one of the best frontline duos for him setting up. I think this Leviathans team is a team that everyone has to make sure they're circling on their calendars, and that we, up here on the desk, we have to make sure we're putting a respect on their names. They're one of the most consistent teams for the regular season. I'll go ahead and exclude the playoffs and all those regular season games. And when it came here to start of Season 8, they stepped up. I think that you're right. This is a big game they're about to have to play up against the Kings, but I think it's a disservice to the Leviathans. Then I say in this match of the week, the Leviathans are favored.
Yeah, I'd have to say out of two of those, one, it was nice to get to see Shinto play that Persephone before the rework comes through, right? Because that was something that was signature for him last year, looked really good this time around. But also, I have to throw myself under the bus because I was one of the naysayers. For some reason, I forgot about the core 3v3 and how good it is for the Leviathans, and ended up being one of those guys that just discounted them. But Dave, I know that you've got to go get prepped here for the SPL as we get going, so we're going to let you go ahead and take a little bit of a back seat here, and we're going to end up bringing in MYFLIN. But before we have MYFLIN fully in here, I want you to take a look at this. Blues Ultra, I believe, on Twitter and Instagram, as well as Reddit. You can pretty much see these wherever you want to. Makes these awesome graphics that come through Really, really good synopsis and recaps for the week. Again, it gets you all the numbers you need to know. You know the longest games, the shortest games, the deadliest games, your player KDAs, the damage, the gold. I mean, more stats than honestly half of you will want to know is going to be included in this, usually split into 4 separate graphics. It's always really fun, so I recommend going and giving it a follow. I also tweet out a couple of stats, but let's just face it, these are beautiful, and that beats out any tweet any day than what you could see. And so this is something, and again, someone that I recommend following if you like that, or if you don't have the time. I mean, you know, for us, we get to sit around and hang around and watch all of these SBL games, but maybe you're wondering who was the top pick and what was their win rate and all those fun things. You're going to be able to find those. We still got Finch with us, and now we've got MYFLIN as we bring him in. And this is actually exciting because both of you have been around for a while and have been able to see some interesting picks and bans that have been able to culminate through the years of Smite. And so I'm going to give you some picks that we saw through the last week, either the top bans, top picks, or somebody that maybe was kind of missing in there, and get your quick thoughts on them. So MYFLIN, specifically for you, you know, on her was the #1 pick in every game. He was the most picked god last week. Why?
Well, I think it's got something to do with ADCs really wanting to establish dominance, and what better god to do it on than on her, who I would equate to the epitome of MOBA balance by and large, full stop. I'm talking every single MOBA on the planet should be trying to emulate exactly what On Her brings. But if we're talking about relative strengths of god picks, I think that On Her brings versatility inside a defense, that ultimate Desert Fury almost acting as a standard just AoE mage ultimate, able to have that piercing damage and burst potential, as well as just being a very safe pick, having a standard leap, as well as being able to drop a slow for yourself, means that he can play that defensive style if so needed, or he can hit that gas pedal whenever he needs to as well. Look, I think that On Her's just a pick is going to stay around for a while. I don't think he's ever going to be that #1 slot. Well, I mean, he's always going to get outshined ever slightly by some of these globals, but he's always going to be around the top.
And, you know, someone that has been solidly performing and On Her, it makes sense to have someone very solid and strong beside him, right? And that's where one of the top bans comes in for this week. Finch, Athena was tied with Tiamat for the top bans in the league. Both of them managed to get 1 game in, which was a little confusing, I think, on both parts. Tiamat at least has new god bias behind it. Why is Athena so heavily banned?
Primarily has to be her versatility, right? You can play Athena over in solo, jungle, or over in support, right? And that all alone just ruins your picks and bans. Then you have to add in that there's this additional damage on Confound, which improves her in the jungle and solo, and allows her to function a little bit more on her own. And then if we just talk about how good Confound is, even when it didn't have damage on it, is one of the best CC setup abilities just in the game, period. Perhaps the best non-ultimate ability that's in the game, period. Defender of Olympus also allows her to have complete global presence, can be anywhere on the map, the mitigation nigh unmatched. Athena is the complete package as far as I'm concerned in terms of a support right about now. This is the kind of god that I would almost always want to be playing, and I've almost always want to be on my team. She fits just about any comp as long as you've got some big follow-up there on the back of taunt.
It's been fun to watch her skyrocket to the top. Again, not a lot of play that we got to see out of her last week, banned 12 of the 13 games. So I guess a little surprising to see her skyrocket from what was kind of devoid last year of Athena. But someone that was missing for a lot of last week, MYFLIN, was Danzaburou. Didn't really show up that often. It was the first year where this new god could be played, and we didn't really get to see any of him. Where is he? Is he just not good enough?
I really don't think so. I think Danzaburou is one of the few gods in the game that is awful from behind, only kind of okay from even, and then potentially one of the best gods from ahead. And that commitment of saying, all right, well, if we have a Danzaburou, sure, if he pulls a level lead or a 2-level lead, he's literally going to one-shot the enemy ADC every single time in the 1v1. Ride a rocket straight into him, at least burn a beads, do it again, take their life. But from even, he doesn't really have the best engage tools. If you go in with your ultimate, you're only just putting yourself in an even fight state. And then if you're playing against Jingwei, she'll just disengage easily. Or if you're playing against On Her, he'll win the 1v1 like that. And then from behind, what is Danzaburou really ever able to do? He doesn't have a true escape, doesn't have a leap, so he can't really escape out of these sticky situations. Dot damage with Bluestone coming through means that his leaf really isn't a consistent escape tool either. So I don't really expect to see Danzaburou coming through too often, unless it's a team composition that's really focused around making sure Duo is able to pull ahead.
And it's fun to watch him play, but hopefully we get a little bit more. He had 1 game, 1 loss last week, so hopefully we get a little bit more out of that. Finch, normally here is where I was going to toss to Tiamat, but I'm going to go ahead and throw out New God bias and, again, some strength in there. I actually want to get to the more interesting pick because Tiamat is strong, but it's the person we were going to talk about after her. We have less than a minute now, so I just want to say, JANUS. Why is he all of a sudden the number 4 pick in the SBL?
There's a lot of reasons. I think JANUS got a little bit of help with some of these starters, right? If he wants a little bit of extra damage, he can. Or if he wants the CDR early, he can with Conduit and Sands of Time. But listen, the map's bigger. He gets around the map better. His damage is a little bit more consistent this season as well. Plus, the kind of people that play him at a really high level are now on even better teams. Herwind, who is our JANUS specialist, I think he's the kind of guy who'd be able, now that he's on a team like this J Dragon squad, to play this JANUS even more often because you got to pan out Mike and all these other people, and then he is free to flourish. JANUS does the damage that you want. He gets around the map the way that you want. He's nigh unkillable if in the right hands because he's so elusive. JANUS makes tons of sense to me as just an all-rounder who can fit nearly any comp. I think you still got to be a little bit more particular about where you use him. Probably want some more consistent damage somewhere else, but it makes sense to me that this god's an almost must-pick, must-ban.
Well, we're going to have to watch this week. I'm excited to see if we get more JANUS. He opens up a different level of play than normal, so I'm excited to see if he continues to be a top pick and ban or if maybe it's just a couple of teams that really, really like playing him. But that does it, again, for like the top picks and bans this week. I think there's a lot of excitement that can be the buzz, but admittedly, for most of them, we just have to wait and see what will happen in the SBL for that part. So we can move ahead instead to looking at some facts, some questions about last week and week number 1 for the SBL that I'll pose to you as well as the chat. You're allowed to answer. I don't have chat open, so it's not necessarily going to reflect well or anything like that. I'm not going to be able to give you points or anything. But the first one and foremost is just how many gods were played in week number 1.
Oh.
It was a good number.
About being friends with Gore is that you hear this number from him because he's just talking about it all the time. And I remember it, Gore, without a doubt. I'm confidently able to say 47.
Yeah, that's what I heard too. 47. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Very
Gore,
close.
Heard him say it. It's
I'm close.
46.
You're very close. Just slightly off, though, and a little under. We had 52 different gods that were played there.
Sounds like a
being able to get a whole smattering, again, of picks that we didn't expect to see. Loki, as a fun fact, was picked the same amount of times this last week as he was in all of the last 5 years combined because he has not been played in the SBL too much. So that one was a very fun one. Question number 2, who do you think was the most first-picked god?
Oh,
there are a lot of good first picks out for it.
It's gotta be Tsukiyomi, right? I feel like that pick was taken first off overall, but also on her. No, I'll take lock in on her because I know Panda Cat did it twice, right? So that's just 2 right there.
So we got on her, we got Scylla, and we got Tsukiyomi thrown out there. But the number 1 first pick god was actually Guan Yu. He was picked 4 times in that first pick spot and was able to win 2 of those 4 games. So he did pretty well. Right behind him were Sobek, Ymir, and then Set, On Her, and Tiamat were hanging around down there as well. Very interesting to see that Guan Yu was hovering out as much as he did. And again, after last year, it's not too surprising to see him still up at the top. But we still have one more chance for redemption. This one I know I tweeted out, so if you saw it, there's a good chance you'll know the answer. Which player had the most kills in week number 1? Bonus points if you can get the number.
Right? Because they had 2 opportunities to get the most kills would be what I'm thinking. Oh, who had double headers? Maybe I just go take a little peek, and that helps me out.
Yeah, take a peek at Gore's Twitter, Finch. You don't have to look at the stats. He said he tweeted it, man. We know where the answers are.
He's gonna go find it. Gotta find it real
Dragons.
fast.
Sam on the Dragons is my guess.
And you know what? That would be
me too.
right immediately, yeah. It would be the exact right answer.
Yeah.
Sam was the one who was able to come out on top. Fun fact, let me make sure I have this right. I'm pretty sure he also had the most deaths on his team. Yeah, he had 31 kills that he was able to do. He beat out Layers by about 11 kills. Layers was at 20 after week number 1. Sam for Soccer also had 11 deaths. He was the highest there, but he also has, I think, tied for the highest first bloods in the league after week number 1. So Sam, as expected after what we saw last year, still killing it out there on the battlegrounds, not having too much of an issue. And unless, I was going to say, unless I was crazy, we'll do what?
Did Myth get any correct? I'm just wondering if Myth got any right.
Well, yeah. I guess
technically,
Sam for
when he
soccer.
slid that Sam in
Yeah,
there
he
at the
said
very
Sam.
end, he like kind of did, but it was like kind of like a piggyback on your answer. So I don't know. But
He's
here's a
louder.
redemption because I don't know this one. We have a bonus fact. Kyle likes to slip these in there because I don't know them. So let me move my camera preview so I can see it. 2 gods were, VMix, move your thing so I can read it, tied for the most last pick god. Name one.
Loki.
Now, let's see. I have my stat sheet up over here if I just happen to go look over there.
Wait, for
No,
the
I
most
shouldn't
picked
do
in
that.
last
That's
spot,
cheating.
not least pick.
Oh, no, but there were a lot.
Who would you want to see the draft for you pick? Like probably a solo laner. Like
Well, because Sun
maybe-
Wukong and Guan Yu are getting prioritized, though, Finch. Like, there's
yes,
no way
maybe
Finch gets
Achilles.
I didn't even get my answer, and I had no idea. Xing and Osiris. Look, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you. I was gonna say Raijin. I was gonna say like Chernobyl. Like I was gonna go through some fancy picks. Xing and Osiris were not on my list for that one. So that's an interesting pickup. That's a good little fact. I did not know that one. Xing and Osiris. But now we can go ahead and look at it. What you're expecting here in week 2. It's kind of down there, way at the very bottom of the screen. But just so you get a much more encompassing view of the week, we're going to have a very big, interesting one ahead of us. Oni Warriors versus Valkyries, that's today. Leviathans and Titans, that's later today. The Warriors with a doubleheader this week up against the Scarabs tomorrow. The Titans with a doubleheader going up against the Dragons. And the Valkyries completing their week against the Bolts as the Kings, towards the very end of it, take on the Leviathan. So a lot of teams playing twice this week, giving us a bigger peek at, say, like the Leviathans, a good look at the Bolts, or the Valkyries specifically, the Warriors and the Titans, some of those teams that are down at the bottom, tied for 7th, or just there at 6th. So it'll be fun to see if they can make the rise up against some of these teams that have slowly but surely, like, are looking like they could pull ahead into the top 4. Finch and Myth, do you have a team that you're kind of keeping your eye on this week to see what they can accomplish?
Yeah, I'm watching the Leviathans. Kind of as I said back in my recap a little bit earlier, I think this team has a really good shot to be a really strong team here, so that's who I'm watching. They got a big doubleheader. I think they can go 2-0.
Well, I guess to maybe nobody's surprise, I'm always keeping my eyes on the perceived lower end of the league. I really want to see some more from the Scarabs here. I feel like the win against the Valkyries is a good heat check for them, but I want to see them play against a team that isn't on elevated ping, a team that is a little bit more established, and see how they're capable of growing week by week. It's almost the same narrative that was around Obey last year, constantly improving. But I want to see if this team can really improve at a rate that they can become a threat by the time we start to get to that land phase.
Well, it makes sense, these two teams, like the Leviathans that we've been looking at, but specifically looking at some of the matches that we have this week. The Kings will be taking them on just at 1-1. They had one more game to play than the Leviathans, so it makes sense that maybe they're going even. Plus that loss, as was highlighted earlier, both by Dave and by Finch, was to the Dragons, so not necessarily maybe a very easy, I want to say guessing game, or an easy win for them. That's the way I wanted to say. The Kings versus the Leviathans is the very last match there on Sunday. Didn't realize that part. That's one I think that is going to be worthwhile tuning in. The Leviathans, as was talked up by Finch. The Kings, as was talked up by Dave a little bit earlier, clashing. And it's going to be fun to watch if the Leviathans can hold their own, or the Kings will take the crown for that one. Here's the predictions for this week. And you can see down at the bottom, there's the chat, or I should say the Smite game, I guess, poll that would come directly from the end game. We all seem to agree on the Leviathans here at the beginning. We disagree with the general populace. All the casters here thinking for the Oni Warriors in their 2 sets. Jade Dragons is gleaming all the way through. I'm the only one who went Valkyrie, so I guess I'll talk to you guys about that. And you know, Dave isn't here to defend his Kings pick a little bit later on. Why am I alone? Bolts versus Valkyries. Nobody wants to hang out with me. Myth?
Well,
just rolling your eyes, man. You're leaving me out to dry.
Here's the thing, Gore. They're just like, there's a whole ocean between us and them,
There
right?
is a
They were
whole
already
ocean. Yeah,
struggling
you're right.
up against the Scarabs. I feel like, if anything, just if we're talking raw potential as well as empirical data from last week, my vote and the community vote probably right.
Finch, how about you? How are you feeling about that matchup? Just the bolts-wise, I feel like maybe I'm underestimating them.
I do think the Bolts have a good shot, but it's also that I kind of got to agree with Myth. It's just they're fighting through a little bit too much
it's a whole
extra
ocean
here on this one. Yeah, but I think it makes some sense, Gore. I think it might be closer than people think.
Well, it'll be a fun one to watch. Of course, that one's going to be later this week. Right now, we do still have 2 matchups coming up today. The Valkyries and the Warriors are your first matchup. Guys, we're going to take a quick break, come back with the SBL. The stream may be resetting, so if that happens, don't panic. Just refresh, stick around, and we'll be right back with the SBL.